Cool. Hey everyone, excited to jump into our next portfolio thesis video. I'm excited to have the founder CEO Zach of Elenas, one of our Latin American portfolio companies that's really developed a quite innovative approach to social commerce. As a background thesis, development. Personally, over the last 15 years, as I've been doing venture capital, I've had an opportunity to evaluate a large number of social commerce, and the wave of social commerce has kind of come and gone in waves, and has also kind of spun up across different geographies in different ways. And something that really fascinated us from an investment thesis really was Elenas' unique approach to social commerce, in that we've seen the challenges in some cases of social commerce, but we've also seen the hyper promise of what social commerce can do, from increasing scalability in a way that it could have never been done before. And I think, Zach, what you guys have developed at Elenas really is quite unique in its approach to social commerce, and one of the big reasons why we made the investment. I guess maybe to kick things off, maybe just give a high-level overview about what Elenas is in the framework as a social commerce, like what even is social commerce, maybe as a high level, how is Elenas leveraging social commerce to effectively scale in a way that most commerce companies can't.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on. And obviously, thank you for being a great partner to us via the investment and allowing us to be part of your portfolio. We're very excited with that. So excited to be here. Happy to talk a little bit more about what social commerce is, who we are, what we do at Elenas, and where we're going. So yeah, maybe to kick things off, what is social commerce? The truth is social commerce is a very broad theme and concept and business type that encompasses a lot of things, because social commerce just means any type of commerce that has a social element to it. If you read reports that have come out recently from Facebook, they call a lot of Meta is social commerce. So they say Instagram is social commerce just because people are buying because they see something on Instagram. And it stretches from that all the way towards models that are built around group buying, seller-focused models where you have an intermediary who's selling a certain product, community leader models where you have kind of combined distribution among social circles. So there's a ton of different ways that this can kind of manifest itself. And the reality is it's a relatively new business model being built on these social, like a relatively new kind of startup category, given that it's something that really came about with the advent of social media and social interactions online in the past few years. What social commerce really focuses on is how do you leverage these social connections and social networks and interactions between people to move product in a more efficient way. As you alluded to, kind of the first wave of e-commerce was, we're going to build a store online and the consumer is going to go to that store and purchase in the same way the way that they go to a market or a mall today and buy something. And what has happened, and what I think a lot of companies have realized, both in the social commerce space and in the traditional e-commerce space, is that by leveraging connections between people, between consumers, in terms of recommendation, in terms of buying together, in terms of really building community, there's a lot more leverage and a lot more efficiency in the way that people can be driven to make a purchase. And that can also lead to not just efficiency in terms of acquisition costs, in terms of retention of user bases, but also in terms of logistics and things like that, where you can get to better economies of scale as people purchase together or because of somebody else. So that's a little bit on social commerce. Like I said, there's a bunch of different companies around the world doing different forms of social commerce. To explain a little bit about what we do specifically at Elenas and what form of social commerce we've built, it's important to give some context about the Latin American ecosystem and retail channels today. And what's important to focus on there is that there is a channel that exists today in Latin America that is social commerce, but the old-fashioned way. And what is that? It's basically catalog selling. So I'm sure many people listening to this podcast at some point have heard about companies like Mary Kay or Avon, or maybe you've heard of Natura or Tupperware, companies that built business models off of social commerce, but back when it was taking a catalog to your friend's house and selling them a product, or having a party where you showed products and sold them. And this was a very successful business model for a good amount of time in the US. And now it's sort of faded away in the US and in places like Europe. But what's fascinating is that in Latin America, direct sales and catalog selling is still a massive industry. If you look at the space, it's about $25 billion a year in Latin America that flows through catalog selling, that traditional model, door-to-door, person-to-person today in the region. So it hasn't gone anywhere. It's actually continued to grow. Every year that market gets bigger and bigger. And there's 15 million people who sell with these catalogs. And so what Elenas is really built off of and what we've developed is saying, how can we combine that traditional model, which works incredibly well, where you have networks of mostly women who use direct selling, use catalog selling as a way to earn extra income, sell products to their friends and family, give recommendations, develop their own business. How do you take that model that's still sort of stuck in the technology of like the 1980s and bring it into kind of the modern technology of today? And that's exactly why I started Elenas and what the vision of the business is. How can we connect those worlds, the digital with the traditional? How can we help empower women, especially across Latin America, to build their business, but to do that through social media channels, through digital product in a more innovative and more modern and a more efficient way? And so to do that, we've built a product that any person in Latin America can download our app. They can get access to thousands of products at wholesale prices. And then they can share those products over TikTok, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram with their friends and family. And when somebody decides to purchase from them, after they give them the recommendation, walk them through that whole purchasing process, they can earn a commission and earn income from that sale and from running their business via Elenas. So that's a little bit of a high level sort of what we do.
No, that was certainly well framed. Yeah, and I think in the as a VC and also as founders, we look for business models that have unique hacks for scalability and capital efficiency. And I think when you get social commerce right, it really unlocks the capability of scaling very unlike most e-commerce companies. If you think most e-commerce platforms that are marketplaces have a pretty big marketing budget, right? That you have to spend on marketing dollars to drive consumers to basically buy products. With social commerce, you basically have hacked the CAC, you could say.
Exactly.
And in that sense, you've been able to grow significantly, literally in the millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars, to where you've not had to use a traditional marketing play, but where you can actually leverage the overall benefit of the women that are part of your community. And another part that resonated with us was social commerce is very unique based on the geography of how cultural support is of social commerce. I think if you think of it's not only women in Latin America, it is the fact of the Latin American culture of how people learn about things, buy things, are comfortable with buying and selling in a community way that's also different from the United States. But maybe share a little bit of the insight about the power of how you're leveraging social commerce to scale more capital efficiently. And then maybe secondly, if you could share something I really appreciated on the high integrity of Elenas is that there are some platforms out there that are the multi level marketing platforms. You guys have kind of decided to go completely away from that, which I think is a really good way of building great karma and also just a great business overall to not do that approach. But it's a topic that undoubtedly always comes up when you talk about the space of social commerce. But the way that you guys are doing it is still hyper scalable, but I think with high integrity. And if you can kind of share a little bit of the of that unique aspect of how it helps with the capital efficiency, that'd be great.
Absolutely. No, and for us, like you said, to talk a little bit about the capital efficiency piece of things, we built a business that, and what's really amazing about this model is we have a network of women entrepreneurs who work with us, micro entrepreneurs who have built their business using Elenas. And when they built that business, they have this network of clients who trust them, who purchase from them on a consistent basis. And so instead of a traditional e-commerce model where you have to go out and pay for every single client and then for every single repurchase, we have this network of micro entrepreneurs who are doing that work, right? So we onboard somebody at a relatively low cost because there's already this giant network of 15 million people who sell, and they bring their clients with them. So our average seller, our average entrepreneur who works with us, she brings us 10 clients. So our CAC of however much it costs to bring that seller on is then divided by 10. So our end consumer acquisition cost is microscopic. And then she's also doing that work to drive the repurchase down the road. So a lot of these kind of pieces that become so expensive and so heavy in e-commerce, and you see a lot of e-commerce companies fail because of this, because they can't get the LTV to CAC right because the CAC is so high and it's so hard to drive recurrence. We sort of flip that on its head and basically dive into these existing communities and enables us to scale in a much more efficient way. So that's sort of on your first point. On the second point, and what's really, a big part of why I do what I do, or a big part of why our team does what they do, is because we believe that this is ultimately one of the best ways and best models through which we can help and empower and support women entrepreneurs across Latin America. If you look at what's happened over the past years in Latin America, you have a ton of gig economy businesses that have come up, right? The Ubers that have shown up, and the Rappies, and food delivery, and grocery delivery, and on-demand kind of earning opportunities. But if you think about it, if you're a woman who has a family and you have kids and you're at home taking care of your kids, you can't just pick up and go drive an Uber. You can't keep your kids in the back of the car. You can't go deliver groceries on a motorcycle or on a bicycle. You're at home taking care of your kids. So how many opportunities are there really for people to build a business, for them to drive extra income, for them to support their families? And one of the primary ways that they do that is through these catalog selling models. And what we're really doing with our business is empowering hundreds of thousands of women who now work with us to build a business, to drive income, and to be able to do it from home. They can do everything from their phone. They're promoting online, they're referring products, they're recommending, they're driving sales, they're earning money, and they're doing it in a way in which it doesn't put them at risk. And it really gives them an opportunity. And beyond that, when you start to look at the differentiation between the traditional catalog and what we do, as you alluded to, there's a lot of challenges with the existing model, with the physical catalog model of kind of the past, which is that you see these multi-level pyramid schemes. Oftentimes, most of the time, people have to buy their own inventory and then resell it. So people get stuck with inventory, they take on risk, they have to deliver the products, and it can become a really kind of, nasty model. And that's not saying that all catalog companies are like that, because there are a lot that aren't, but it does happen. And in our model, what we've really focused on is, as I mentioned before, when our network of sellers goes to the app and they place an order, and let's say, Maria wants to send a product to her friend Anna, who wants to purchase from her, the product goes directly to Anna's house. So the client receives the product directly, and our sellers never take inventory, they never take risk, they never have to buy products, and there's no multi-level model. So we're really kind of giving them this even a better opportunity to earn and grow their business, but taking away all that risk and taking away all of kind of the negative aspects of that traditional model via the technology.
Great. Yeah, that was for us. That was a big one. We've been pitched many multi-level marketing plays, and some of them are they're definitely powerful business models, but part of it is a question of where do you want to make investments, and for an integrity perspective, where do you want to place your bets? Talk a little bit about the sustainable competitive advantage also that you guys have been continue to build out, because again, when founders are pitching us, something that is truly differentiated is when you have aspects of what you've built that have kind of a sustainable competitive advantage and an unfair competitive advantage. And I know on the inventory side, you guys have done a very unique approach where there's the Amazons of the world and the Walmarts of the world that try to sell everything and anything. There's hyper curated, models, and then there's something in between. And what you guys have done, I think, on the inventory side is quite unique in the terms of what you've developed to develop a competitive advantage and an unfair, sustainable advantage overall. But talk a little bit about how you've thought through that as you've developed Elenas, and kind of when you think about how you've done that, what are some of the core sticking points that allow for that?
So, for us, we built a model that, and this is something that we focused on from the beginning, where we really emphasized that we didn't want to have an asset heavy, inventory heavy model. This is something that if you look at different social commerce businesses, different companies have taken different decisions on this, depending on their business model. But it was something for us where we sort of mixed and combined a couple of aspects that are really important, which is we want to be able to, we sort of started with the fact that we wanted to, not even with the fact we didn't want to own inventory, that's obviously very beneficial to the business, but we started with really the user need, which was the biggest population that we could serve of people who currently sell and currently buy through these traditional channels, and that is the least served by e-commerce in Latin America, is the rural population. The majority of the population are not in the major cities. The majority of the population are not the high-end consumer. The majority of the population is still not served by e-commerce, right? The majority of people in Latin America have never made a purchase online. So in order to get to that population that is outside of major cities, that's in rural areas, small towns, you have to think about, okay, what's a logistics model that I can scale? I can't possibly build my own logistics model, right? I can't possibly build my own logistics model because I don't have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars it would take to do that. So I have to work with third-party logistics partners to get out there. And if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to use 3PLs and I'm going to get out to more rural areas, it also means I can't send perishable products, right? I have to send products that are non-perishable. Okay, so, and also there's going to be probably a higher cost of logistics. So I have to be able to pay that with a higher basket size product. And that led us to think, okay, why don't we focus on categories that are sort of higher ticket products that are non-perishable, but that work really well in the social selling and person-to-person selling models. And so what do you get to? You get to beauty products, home goods products, clothing and accessories. Those are products where you can build out, and this is what we did, a marketplace model, work with various manufacturers and brands who own those products that keep them in their warehouses, and you can ship them directly from that brand's warehouse to the end consumer in a way that works in the economics. And so by doing all that, we don't own vehicles, we don't own logistics hubs, we don't own inventory, we don't have a warehouse, we never touch the product. They go directly from the manufacturer or from the brand to the end consumer. And we're able to operate in a really asset light way, which especially in the current has helped us to scale really fast. It's helped us to be really efficient with capital. And especially today in the current fundraising environment, in the current macroeconomic context, it's a real advantage.
No, agreed. I think when we've now started building out our portfolio in Latin America outside of just the US, and you guys really differentiate yourself with the growth rate that you've been able to achieve given the amount of capital that you've raised. And so like the proof is there. Like the numbers are very much validated that you have a hyper capital efficient model for a relatively small amount of capital raised compared to the ARR that you guys have. And so it's great because the model has actually been realized in terms of that success. When you think of the value prop from a consumer, or I guess a customer's perspective, and this both customer as the person that's doing the selling as well as the person that's doing the buying, both of them as kind of customers for you. How have you guys thought about the magnitude of improvement in terms of optionality? There's obviously the status quo of buying things from other places. But how did you focus on what to focus on the sense of how do we provide the most value prop for the end buyer, and how do we provide the most value prop for the seller to make them put in the effort to even make this whole engine run? Because you need to basically be really emphasizing and amplifying the need for wanting to make money and to getting a great deal and for getting a great curated experience. But it really comes down to that the overall value prop to the buyer and the seller. How did you kind of focus on those two different aspects?
We definitely started with the seller, right? We started with the seller and saying, okay, we know that there's this traditional model. We know that there's millions of sellers out there. What can we improve in the model, right? And I think I mentioned already a couple of big things we've improved, right? We've taken this model where people have to go door to door with a physical catalog. We've built a digital model where they can easily share into digital channels, into social media, and share really digitally native content, videos, photos, etc. We've made it so that instead of just having 200 products to sell from one brand, we've given them access to tens of thousands of products across hundreds of brands that they can sell. So a much bigger portfolio, much more access to product, much more likelihood that they're going to be able to sell to one of their clients. And then on top of all that, we're giving them, the logistics service to their end consumer. We're giving the payments processing that they need to run their business. So for a lot of reasons, this is a model that's much more scalable, much more efficient for them. It allows them to sell and earn a lot more. From a consumer perspective, we are still leveraging a lot of the existing behavior patterns in which consumers in Latin America, and this is very hard and this has always been a challenge for me with non-Latin America based investors for people to really get, but consumers are so used to and so accustomed to, and it's so important for them to buy from a trusted source. I think in the US, we've gotten very used to and very comfortable with just going to any website and putting in our credit card information and buying the product. But even on the biggest e-commerce sites, the ones with the most traction, most people here in Latin America still don't trust them, right? And still rely really heavily on, instead of going to the big grocery store, they'll go to their corner store where they've been shopping for 30 years from the same guy, right? They'll still buy via their friends and family and the recommendation of those people. And there's a lot of trust in communities. The value proposition we're offering to the consumer is we're not a discount platform, right? We're not offering a product that you can't get anywhere else. We're not offering you, a 50% discount on the product. That's not where we drive value. But what we're offering is for each of those consumers, they're getting a personalized service. They're getting a personal shopper, essentially, who's the seller, who's talking to them, who's giving them the recommendation, who's walking them through the product. If anything goes wrong, they can go back to that person. And they know that that purchase is going to be okay and successful. and that they're going to walk away without being, defrauded or without being taken advantage of because they have trust in their friend or their family member who's selling for them. And that's really the most important piece here.
I'm with you. And then maybe share a little bit on your own journey as a founder. In order to arrive at the current, hyper scalable business model, oftentimes it doesn't come from being a first time founder. It can, but that's usually if you have like either a secret that you've unlocked in being your first startup, or you have experience in looking at a variety of other things that you've done beforehand. So share a little bit about the journey to arrive at Elenas. Well, what was some of the journey that made you kind of understand that this was a really big opportunity to go after?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in being, in spirit of full transparency, this isn't anything that isn't available elsewhere. But I started this business when I was 20. Now, I started my first small business startup when I was 10 years old, right? So this has been in kind of my blood since I was a child. I love building businesses. I'd started a bunch of small companies. I'd worked at a couple of venture-backed startups already by the time I was 20 and starting Elenas. So not that I didn't have any experience, but I'm certainly not a 40-year-old, 4-time founder that worked at, that worked at Slack for 10 years, right? Like, I mean, and so how did I end up at this, and how did we get to success? I mean, I attribute to a few things. One, I only got to this business, and especially because I'm an American guy who grew up in Los Angeles, building a business mostly focused on Latin American women in Colombia. It's also very far from like kind of my personal experience. The only reason I was able to build this business, and the only reason I think we've gotten to where we've gotten to, is because I spent a huge amount of time listening. When I first got to Colombia, I did 150 interviews, market research. I sat down with families in their homes for an hour and a half, and I talked to them about their lives. I talked to them about their spending habits. I talked to them about which platforms they were buying on, which places they were buying from, what their household income was, how they decided where to spend it, what their challenges were. And that research process, it was where the idea for Elenas came from. It was not an obvious, now looking back, it was an obvious solution, but for me, I had no idea. I had no idea about this catalog selling business. I had no idea about the importance of social selling. And I only got there because I really opened up and said, I'm going to let this all in. I'm going to consume as much as I can. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to understand their needs, and hopefully I'll get to something. And eventually, obviously, got to the idea of the business. And that principle of listening to users and being humble and understanding that I don't know anything, that I have to learn from the people I'm working with, from the users who I'm working with and who I want to serve, has also become a core kind of tenet of the culture of the company, right? That every single employee in the company cares about this mission of what we're doing and is highly motivated towards listening and understanding and constantly talking with our user base, right? And then the second thing I would say is I very quickly surrounded myself with what would probably be seen as a relatively large leadership team for an early stage startup. Quite quickly, because I understood also not only did I have to listen to users, but I also had to surround myself with people who had much more experience, especially in Latin America, in building out certain aspects of the business. So, a VP of operations who could manage the logistics and the customer service, a VP of supply who knew how to scale the commercial operation and get partnerships with the different brands, a VP of growth who had worked in acquisition and paid marketing, and all those types of positions where I said, I'm going to find people who have 10, 15, 20 years of experience to surround myself with, who really know what they're doing, and give them the responsibility and to follow this vision and mission, and to drive kind of the results that we need to get to.
No, that's awesome. And I guess when you think about founders that are either starting to think about creating a company, or maybe you've created companies in the past, any good advice that you would give for how do you eventually find the product market fit and the play that you actually want to like go all in on to start scaling and investing a good part of your life into building out? Any kind of guiding principles that you'd offer in terms of either thinking about, is it a big enough market? Are you surrounding yourself with the right people? How to know if you're developing that product market fit? Any good words of wisdom that you've kind of learned to be some really solid truths for you for what you've built?
I mean, I think there's a lot of great advice out there in books and podcasts and things like that. And I don't know if anything I'm going to say is revolutionary, but I would say that what I've found to be true that I learned from others as well is I think you have to take it one step at a time, right? And I don't think you have full confidence in the business and that it's going to be a massive success from day one. You build out an MVP, you test it, you see if there's positive results, you keep going, you try a more advanced version, you hire some people, you raise a bit more money. I think the only advice I would give is I think it's actually incredibly detrimental to raise a lot of money early on.
Sure.
I scraped by with very little in the way of investment in capital for the first few years. And as you mentioned, part of the reason we built the business model we did was out of necessity. We just didn't have the money to pour into infrastructure and logistics and these kind of things. So we had to be lean and we had to be scrappy and we had to be asset light. And I think that meant that like we were more intentional with each step we took. We tested and had to drive results in order to raise capital in a more intentional way. We were more concerned about the unit economics from an earlier point. So I would say, I think there's a piece of growing conviction over time as you start to see results from users. I think obviously listening to users constantly and getting feedback on whether there's really a fit there and really they're excited about what you're building. And then I think ultimately it's not getting too far ahead of yourself with the capital raising and what you build out before the business is ready.
Agreed. Yeah, it's amazing how in the 15 years that I've been doing venture, how companies are achieving much more user and revenue traction at earlier stages in time with less and less capital. Like the capital efficiency of general startups continues to be impressive. And there's a good report that came out from Wing VC, which showed the average revenue of pre-seed, seed, Series A has continued to kind of go up directionally. That really supports the fact that companies are achieving more with less. Over the last few decades. And again, getting into these hyper capital efficient plays is nice. In terms of the future, I guess, what do you see right now as the future of social commerce, the future of Elenas? We recently created our Web3 team. And so a lot of the future right now, we're thinking in the Web3 mentality of blockchain and crypto and the metaverse and multi-layering of data. Is there anything about the future of Web3 that you see in social commerce that's like going into the world of VR, AR, or any other kind of core innovations that you see of how is the future of social commerce, do you think, going to evolve, whether within Web3 or outside of Web3, and any kind of insights for the future of social commerce?
I think what we're seeing is, obviously there's a huge amount of, I think, innovation in the space, generally speaking. And I think what we're seeing is that, ultimately, I don't think social commerce has to be or will be on necessarily the cutting edge of tech, right? AI, Web3. I'm not sure that that's necessarily that has to be true or that has to be embedded for this to be successful. What I would say is that there's definitely a component of like live shopping, which has definitely blown up, and video shopping and video content that has blown up in China and in Asia that I think will be an important part moving forward. And we've definitely seen that becoming more and more important in the space. But I'd say more broadly speaking, where do I see the market going? Where do I see the space going? I think it's going to have to shift now with the current market setting into more capital efficient models, more asset light models. And I think a lot of the really heavy, really capital intensive businesses that have been built are really going to struggle in this current environment. So I think you're going to see less food. I think you're going to see less groceries. I think you're going to see less warehousing and less logistics because the market's just not going to support it.
And then I guess on the Elenas side, I guess anything you want to share about, I guess, the future vision of what you're looking to build out overall? I guess what's kind of next, I guess, more of like, I guess, guiding principles and guiding overall play as you're thinking about the evolution of Elenas as well. You have Latin America is pretty big. You got 660 plus million people that are potential buyers. And so what's the general thought about how do you continue to grow the platform that you've now created?
Yeah, so I think we grow it in a couple of ways, right? Today we operate in Mexico and Colombia, only in 2 countries, and obviously there's an opportunity to expand far beyond that, to expand into Brazil, to expand into Peru, to expand into Chile, to Argentina, to Ecuador. As you mentioned, 600 million plus people, and right now we're touching, in our total market size, less than half of that. So that's definitely one of the ways we can do that. The other way, and I think importantly, is driving kind of continued growth of our seller network. So what we've seen is that, today we have a few 100,000 active sellers working with us on the platform, and we are going to grow that number. The goal is to get that number into the millions, right? There's 15 million sellers today across the region. We want to get in the millions of people who are working with us and growing their businesses. And not just in the way that they do today, but giving them continued access to more services and more products to sell and manage their business with. And so what does that look like? Financial services, building in financial services for people who haven't had access to financial services, giving them better management tools, giving them new products to sell, services to sell, and sort of making Elenas the hub for and the one-stop shop for anybody who wants to build a business and develop that business in Latin America.
No, obviously, the thing it's a very powerful channel strategy that you've developed. Right now more on the things around beauty and household goods, but really what you're building is a really really powerful channel strategy for selling stuff that can kind of be activated for selling across a broad range of things. And I think it's kind of directing that energy in a variety of ways that you guys continue to grow, as well as the expansion of geography. But yes, super excited for what you guys have built. Really excited to be a backer of Elenas and continue to be supportive of the company. So thank you very much for sharing. And I thought this conversation would be interesting because it very much anchors around the thesis of, there's lots of different approaches to social commerce, but does a company ultimately find the one that works? And you certainly have found one that 100% works. And I think it works uniquely well for the demographic and the geography that you're also doing it in. So it's a lot of good stars aligning for the success that you've had, and obviously a lot of hard work you and your team have put in. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been an exciting journey thus far, and like I said, we're excited to partner together. And I think we see, a really massive potential for social commerce and for Elenas in the region over the next years. And we're excited to see how we execute and the impact we can make on that together.
Great.
So
Cool.
thanks for the time and thanks for the work.
Cool. Thanks, Zach.